like my women like I like my toast. Hot
and consumable with butter.
Ever been in a house where the heat technically works, but the thermostat is lying? You crank it up, nothing happens. So you turn it higher, still nothing. Now you're annoyed, pacing around, checking vents, blaming the heater. Even though the heater isn't the problem, the signal never reached it. That's today's dungeon. Welcome back to the Male System series, where we stop chasing numbers and start understanding why systems respond or don't. I'm your host, Barbosa, still carrying the party, still explaining why the thing everyone obsesses over is usually the last thing that should be blamed. Today we're talking about testosterone, or more accurately, why testosterone levels get all the attention while the signaling system that controls it gets ignored. Because here's the part most men never hear. Testosterone doesn't just drop, it gets downregulated. The body doesn't lose the ability to produce it. The brain and nervous system decide it's not a priority right now. That decision happens upstream. Stress signals, inflammation signals, energy availability signals, safety signals. The control center, meaning the brain working with the nervous system, looks at the environment and decides whether high drive output makes sense. If conditions look expensive, unpredictable, or inefficient, the signal gets turned down, not shut off, just dialed back. That's why men can still function, but don't feel the same hunger, aggression, or drive they used to. The thermostat still works. It's just reading the room differently. If you clear this dungeon, here's what you'll walk away with. You'll understand why testosterone is an output, not a switch. You'll see how lifestyle, stress, digestion, and recovery directly affect hormonal signaling. And you'll finally understand why forcing testosterone without fixing the signal never holds. We're not chasing numbers today. We're tracing the signal. Let's run it. Now, let's clear up how this system actually runs. Testosterone doesn't operate on a timer. It doesn't wait for you to want something, and it doesn't respond to pep talks. Production starts with the brain and nervous system. The control center. That control center constantly checks the environment. Sleep quality, stress load, inflammation levels, energy availability, recovery speed. It's asking one question: can this system afford high output behavior right now? If the answer looks expensive, the signal gets turned down, not off, down. The testes don't stop working. They receive fewer instructions to push output. This is why blood tests confuse people. Levels might be normal, yet drive feels flat, motivation feels muted, libido feels unreliable, because signaling quality matters more than raw capacity. Think of it like a factory. The machines still work, the lights are on, but management slows production when supply chains get shaky. That slowdown protects resources. The body does the same thing. Here's why testosterone signaling drops early. High drive output is costly. It demands energy. It demands recovery. It demands stability. From a biological standpoint, reproduction and aggressive drive only make sense when conditions look predictable. So when stress stays elevated, when inflammation lingers, when digestion struggles, when sleep stays shallow, the control center adapts. It doesn't panic, it doesn't fail, it reallocates. Energy gets routed towards systems that keep you upright and functional. Drive becomes optional, libido becomes conditional. That's why men often notice the change subtly. They still train, they still work, they still think, but the edge softens. Desire doesn't initiate on its own. Momentum requires more effort. Recovery takes longer. The system is conserving, and this is why shortcuts rarely hold. Boosting output without improving conditions just teaches the control center to stay cautious longer next time. In the next sections, we'll walk through the biggest signals the brain and nervous system respond to: stress chemistry, inflammation, and energy availability, and why cleaning those up does more for testosterone signaling than chasing the hormone directly. That's where this starts making sense. Let's talk about stress. Not the motivational kind, the chemical kind. Stress isn't just a feeling, it's a set of signals moving through the body. When stress stays elevated, the brain and nervous system shift priorities. Resources go toward alertness. Focus stays narrow. Energy gets reserved for survival tasks. This changes how the body allocates fuel. High drive systems require surplus. They assume recovery will happen later. They assume tomorrow is predictable. Stress tells the control center something else. It says conditions are unstable. It says conserve. It says don't overspend. So output changes. Desire doesn't initiate as easily. Drive requires effort instead of momentum. Libido becomes reactive instead of spontaneous. This isn't punishment, it's budgeting, and it explains something most men notice before anything else changes. Strength often stays. Performance can still show up, but wanting to engage fades first. That's because desire is optional. Alertness is not. Now layer in inflammation. Inflammation changes how expensive everything feels to the system. Movement costs more, recovery takes longer, signals take extra effort to transmit. From the perspective of the brain and nervous system, the environment starts looking inefficient. That affects hormonal signaling. Testosterone production assumes energy will be available later to support recovery, reproduction, and output. Inflammation reduces confidence in that assumption. So the signal gets dampened, not eliminated, just restrained. This is why men dealing with gut issues, poor diet, lack of sleep, or chronic stress often feel a mismatch. They can still perform when they push. They just don't feel pulled toward it anymore. And energy exists, access doesn't. And this is also why improving digestion, reducing inflammation, and restoring recovery changes drive without directly targeting testosterone. The signal improves because the environment makes sense again. In the next sections, we'll connect this to libido specifically, why desire disappears before physical ability, and how restoring conditions brings it back without forcing the system. That's where the thermostat analogy really lands. This is where a lot of men get confused. They can still lift, still work, still function, so they assume everything's fine, but libido fades first. That's not random. Strength is useful in survival contexts. Alertness is useful. Endurance is useful. Desire is optional. Libido only shows up when the brain and nervous system see excess capacity, extra energy, predictable recovery, low background stress. When conditions tighten, the system keeps what's practical and lets go of what's elective. That's why libido is the canary in the coal mine. It drops long before anything else fails, not as a punishment, as a signal that the environment feels demanding enough that the system is choosing efficiency over expansion. So when men say, I can still perform, I just don't feel the same urge, they're describing a system that's budgeting carefully. The hardware still works, the green light just doesn't come on as often. Here's the part most men never hear. Libido doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to permission. Permission comes from conditions. When sleep improves, when inflammation drops, when digestion stabilizes, when stress stops dominating the signal, the brain and nervous system reassess. Tasks cost less, recovery feels more reliable, energy doesn't get drained as quickly. So access opens up again. Desire returns as spontaneity. Initiation happens without effort. Engagement feels natural instead of forced. That's why chasing libido directly almost never works. Desire isn't a switch you flip. It's a response to an environment the system trusts. And once that trust starts rebuilding, the signal strengthens on its own. In the final section, we'll tie testosterone, libido, stress, and recovery into one loop and show how addressing conditions upstream restores output downstream. That's how this dungeon clears. Let's connect the whole system. Testosterone, libido, and drive don't operate in isolation. They sit at the end of a long decision chain. The brain and nervous system, the control center, collect data from everywhere. Sleep quality, stress load, inflammation, digestion, recovery speed. They don't care about goals, they care about conditions. When conditions feel demanding, the system shifts into conservation. Energy gets routed towards stability. High output behaviors become conditional. When conditions improve, the signal changes. Tasks cost less effort. Recovery feels predictable. Energy stops getting drained as fast. That information feeds back into the control center, and gradually, testosterone signaling strengthens. Libido initiates more often. Drive feels available instead of negotiated. Nothing dramatic happens. There's no sudden surge, no flip of a switch. Things just start responding again. That's the loop. First, you improve conditions, then signals start to stabilize, and finally, your output starts putting out like Craig's mom when she gets 2 wine coolers in her system. This is why focusing on one hormone never works long term, and why addressing digestion, inflammation, stress, and recovery changes everything downstream. Once you see the loop, you stop asking how to force results and start asking how to make the system easier to run. That's how this dungeon clears. All right, dungeon cleared. This wasn't a strength check, this was a signal dungeon. If you made it this far, you now understand something most men never get told. Testosterone, libido, and drive aren't switches. They're responses. They show up when the brain and nervous system see conditions they're willing to support. You followed the full loop: stress, inflammation, digestion, recovery, signaling, and how output changes when that loop tightens or relaxes. That's real progress. Now let's get to the loot drops, the kind you can actually use. Loot drop 1, treat sleep like system maintenance, not optional downtime, same bedtime. Dark room, less stimulation before bed, signal clarity starts there. Loot drop 2, lower background stress instead of trying to overpower it. Too many stressors at once keeps the signal dampened. Choose fewer daily battles. Loot drop 3, support digestion before expecting hormonal changes. If nutrients aren't getting absorbed cleanly, the control center reads the environment as unreliable. Loot drop 4, add low stress movement every day. Walking, stretching, light activity. This tells the nervous system that energy can move without resistance. Loot drop 5, stop chasing libido directly. Build conditions. Desire shows up once the system trusts the environment again. That's solid loot. That's stuff you can apply immediately. Team survived. I took the carry this round. You did the thinking. You keep the XP. Now here's what I want you to sit with. Looking back at everything we covered: stress, recovery, digestion, inflammation, signaling. Which one do you think has been holding your system back the most? And what's one thing you've been trying to force that probably needed better conditions instead? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not for answers, for patterns. If this episode helped something click, send it to someone who's been told their testosterone is fine, but knows something doesn't feel right. Hey, I'm gonna go decompress, combine some herbs in a way the game developers definitely didn't intend, and let the system do what it does best. Different dungeon next time, same party. See you in the next run.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Are you sure about that?